Alright, let's do this thing Seaside style. I again haven't looked at these cards really, except I have checked and made sure that mine was in correctly, and I've also taken a quick look at how long they are, and while I was waiting for this to load, I've seen a couple of the top cards, so no, okay. Anyway, basically this is the first time I've looked at any of them. And let's go. Seaside Week, I expect almost everything to be a duration, and quick glance at this page, they all are. Okay, cool. Anyway, Lockbox. Action duration costs 4 now, and at the start of your next turn, +1 buy is quite weak. It's a terminal plus buy now, and it's a market square later, but I'm sure it's going to be the other thing that's important. When you discard this from play, if you do not buy a card this turn, should be did not, I assume, you may set aside up to 3 treasures from play. At the start of your next turn, put the set aside treasures into your hand. So it's really weak right now. And then next turn, you get to save a few treasures for the next turn, sort of like a mini tactician. But that seems just rather weak. Because it's like 2 turns down the line you get an effect. And the plus buy doesn't anti-synergize, or it does anti-synergize with the whole when you discard from play if you did not buy a card this turn. And I don't really like that. Alright, next is star charts. Action duration costs 5. Now at the start of your next turn, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, discard any number, and put the rest back in any order. So that's the cartographer effect. But on a terminal right now is quite weak, and for next turn, okay, a cartographer next turn is just weaker than cartographer, so that's pretty weak for 5, but okay, I mean, cartographer next turn is not the worst thing ever. It needs to have something good at the bottom here. While it's in play, when a player, so it doesn't have to be you, buys a card other than a victory card, he gains a copy of that card putting on top of his deck. So you get to double 2 of your buys, or 2 turns worth of buys, but not victory cards. They get to double 1. So that's sort of like a talisman effect. You also get a top deck it, which I guess goes well with the filtering. If you had to keep all 4 of those cards, then you would know what 5-card hand you're keeping. Still seems potentially sort of weak. I guess it's not limited like Talisman is, but it is terminal. It's not limited to 4 cost or cheaper, but it is terminal. Yeah, well, could it be broken with anything? I mean, maybe you just double gain golds or whatever, but this turn effect for you is probably going to be weaker than theirs. You get a little filtering. I don't know. Maybe it's okay. I'm guessing it's probably a little weak, but... Okay, Shipwreck Cove. So it's an action attack duration, plus 2 cards. Each other player chooses a card he has in play and discards it. If that card would do something at the start of that player's next turn, that effect is cancelled at the start of your next turn. So, all this does is it's a moat now, village later, that knocks one of their durations out of play. I have a feeling there's just, I don't know how many durations there are, but I don't think there's all that often, and this isn't going to affect Lighthouse anyway. But I don't think that this is going to do something all that often. And knocking a duration out of play is A, not an effect that I particularly like, and B, I mean, like, it totally just really hurts Tactician. It doesn't do anything against Outpost. At least not anything good against Outpost. What do you do if you hit a Haven? they have that set aside card, which is not in play. It's set aside on the Haven mat. I guess it just stays there. Yeah, I don't like this card at all. And it's also just quite weak in the absence of other non-durations. It'd be like a lab if you could play it every turn, but worse than lab significantly. Anyway, Harbor Master. Costs 5, it's a smithy, it's an action duration. Here's one that's not. Anyway, it's a smithy. You may discard from play. If it's in play at the start of your next turn, trash it and plus 3 cards. But this person doesn't understand how durations work. This card will never stay out. You can discard it from play as soon as you play it. This should be on another line. But it will never get triggered because it gets discarded at the end of your turn because there's nothing it does at the start of your next turn in general. Yeah, I don't think this works. But like Smithy now, Hunting Grounds later would be pretty good. I guess, okay, what he probably means to do, I don't know if you can do actually with the way durations are. It's meant to be Smithy now and then can be Hunting Grounds next turn if you want, but you have to decide that at the end of this turn. Or you have to decide that when you play this. Yeah, it should be plus 3 cards now and at the... This is how it would work. Plus 3 cards now and at the start of your next turn. You may discard this... but that doesn't work because it wasn't... Plus 3 cards... If you... You may discard this from play... If you don't... Yeah, then it would be if you don't, at the start of your next turn, trash it and plus 3 cards. But you can also immediately discard it from play, which the other thing that can do for you is if you reshuffle, you get to play it again, which probably doesn't have a big effect, but it doesn't miss the reshuffle if you reshuffle later in the turn. Overall, not interesting enough, and so hoop jumpy through. But it's just like a bigger wharf that could just be a smithy, and I mean that's some interesting design space, but I don't like where this has gone at all. Okay, tariff. 2 money. Choose another player. That already looks very political. At the start of your next turn, plus 1. While this is in play, when the chosen player buys an action or treasure, you may discard a card. If you do, plus a card. So you get some small buff for playing Terminal Silver now, Peddler later, which this part, forget to choose another player, is probably well, just sort of reasonably average middling for a 4 cost. And then you get this really weird, pretty not very important boon. In fact, I think it wouldn't be that bad if you just make it a little bit stronger in multiplayer and just whenever another player, so you don't have to choose one, because it's still somewhat political, because like they're incentivized, unlike anyone else, they're incentivized to not buy actions or treasures, so that like hurts them a little bit. It's not much of an incentive, though. Anyway, Clipper costs 3. Oh, it's not a duration. Plus, it's a cantrip. Put a coin token on an action card pile in the supply. Well, that's right out. Coin tokens. You shouldn't be able to have that in this. Each cards cost 1 less per coin token on their supply pile, but not less than 0. I don't understand why this is Seaside. This is just absolutely something that should get submitted for the whatchamacallit. Why can't I think of it? Guilds. Right? And I'd be fine to evaluate it then, Um, which it's probably fine then, except you're gonna end up making lots of stuff really cheap eventually. Um, because it just doesn't go away. So you're just building up how cheap all these actions are. Of course, your opponent gets to use that first, but anyway, it's definitely a guilds card much more than a not at all a Seaside card. Beacon A. Beacon A. It costs 6. It's an action, not a duration. Plus an action. While it's in play, keep the top card of your deck revealed during your action or buy phase. When the top card of your deck is an action or treasure, you may discard this from play if you do play that card and gain a copy of it. So, okay, interesting. So, I'm not sure how this works because it lets you play actions in your buy phase, presumably without paying their, which is just sort of weird. I wish it was during your action phase if it's an action, and during your buy phase if it's a treasure, I guess, in some kind of sense. But, okay, let's try to forget about the weirdness and see how I think it would play. So you get to, it's like a village, basically, if you play the action with it. If you play the treasure with it, also, right? It's a village that you sometimes don't get to use, but sometimes you get to sort of have a little more filtering as to what you're playing. And then you gain that card. So, I really think that could cost 5. Because you get to gain probably a pretty good, but not great. You can't wait to pull the trigger forever on this. I think it could cost 5. It's sort of interesting, but so confusing and not that interesting to me. So, okay. Cottage. Action duration costs 3 plus 2 cards plus 2 actions. Gotta have a big nerf. Put 2 cards from your hand on top of your deck. Okay. So, that's like an inn, except instead of discarding, you put them on top. At the start of your next turn, should be on a new line, reveal the top 2 cards of your deck. You may discard one of them. You may trash one of them. Put the rest back in any order. So it's like a filterer now. Unfortunately, you can't discard and trash the 2 that you put back, which makes this I don't like, because that's how it feels like it should work, right? But it doesn't, because you draw those in your cleanup. Yeah. And then you get a discard and trash. It's basically like a lookout, but not forced. Which is basically what this card is like an unforced lookout with a little less filtering later and a little more filtering now. Which is too close to lookout for me, and just not that exciting. Okay, Ship of the Line. You may gain a victory card. Its action duration costs 5. You may gain a victory card costing less than a province. So you just gain duchies, dukes, fairgrounds, farmlands, all that stuff with it. Silk roads, gardens, all that stuff. Costing less than a province. At the start of your turn, next turn, plus 3 cards while it's in play. So that really helps you out a lot for slogs. While it's in play, victory cards cost 1 more, which hurts you for slogs. But it also makes their victory cards cost 1 more. Yeah, I mean, that's sort of an interesting design space. But if you just find a way to play a lot of these, you just build an engine out of these, then it's going to be very hard for them to do much. It's going to really grind the game to a halt unless there's like VP tokens or other ones of these or something. Trash for benefit goes up. It definitely has some interesting interactions, and this kind of thing is a design space that I wanted to explore, but I couldn't find a way that I thought worked out well, and I don't think this really does either. Okay, investment. Action, not a duration. Woo! Costs 5. You may choose an action card from your hand. Set aside this and the chosen card on your mat. Return them to your deck at the end of the... That's just island, but much worse. When you play an action... Oh, you have to put an action. When you play an action card, plus 1 money per copy of it on your investment mat. That's got to be terrible at 5. It has to be an action card. I think it would be much better if it didn't have to be, because then you could use it like an island, which should still be much worse than island. But when you play an action, like, obviously the thing that's going to get you the most money is investments. But, like, so the 4th time you play one of these, it's worth 4. No, it's worth 3. And that is a lot to do. And you have to... other action cards, you're just not going to have that many just to set them aside, I don't think. I mean, I guess you could go for something deep with, like, a Pearl Diver, right? You set aside Pearl Diver, and you can maybe do that a few times, but it's going to take quite a while. And then you've got a big cantrip gold or something, which would be really good, but... I mean, seems a little bit Terra broken to me. Although I'm not even sure it's broken in that case. Might just be good. But it just seems so strained overall that I don't really like the feel of it. Alright, Shipyard. Action duration costs 4, plus a card now and at the start of your next turn. Trash a card from your hand. So, next turn it's basically like a junk dealer without the money. Or a upgrade that doesn't get you a card, you know, that kind of space. Now it's a terminal version of that, which makes it overall probably a pretty strong trasher, but I don't think too strong since it doesn't do anything else for you. It's like a split steward, almost. Right? Which can't be that strong. In fact, this is probably weak, if anything. It is a little bit nicer than split steward, since you get a little bit of extra cards out of it. This is probably a fine card, could maybe cost 3, but one of the best I've seen so far, I think. Okay, here we have a double-lined card. Fisherman, it's an action, costs 4, plus a buy, plus a money. When you discard it from play, put one of your Fisherman token on a supply pile. One of your Fisherman token? Fishermen token, wouldn't it be? Or Fisherman tokens? Fisherman tokens on a supply pile that costs 6 or less, which is not a victory card pile. Okay. This is, by the way, not well defined. It should probably be something like of which the top card is not a victory card. But, like, I guess maybe he doesn't want to include knights if Dame Josephine is up. You can work through it, but it's not well defined right now. When you buy a card, gain a copy of it for each of your Fisherman tokens on that pile and remove all of your Fisherman tokens. So it's a really long, slow way of gaining a lot of stuff. Then you have to remove them all. And then each player has his own... that is just too much going on for a weak effect. Just let you gain it all the time. I don't know. And the on-play effect is so weak. Yeah, I just... doesn't do it for me. Okay, Thugs, plus 2 buys, plus 2 money. Haven't we seen that before? I thought it was a weird combination then. I think it's weird now. It's an action attack. It's not a duration. Each other player with 4 or more cards in hand discards 1. For each card he gained last turn, That's a lot to remember. And I discard 4 or 5 all the way down to 0. Each other player with no cards in hand draws 3. That's a much more brutal attack than Militia. If they've got more than one card. If they didn't, then it's a slightly less brutal attack, I guess. Even if they got 5, it's much more brutal, right? If they got 3 or 4, though, it's like absolutely devastating. And I'm just not that big of a fan of that. Like, yeah, I just think this makes the game sort of unfun. People are discarding, and it's quite strong, I'm sure. Anyway, yeah, it's also like strictly better than Woodcutter by quite a margin. It costs 4, but so that's not strictly better, of course. But anyway. Cannon, plus an action, plus a buy. It's an action attack duration, costs 5, plus an action, plus a buy. At the start of your next turn, you may trash up to 2 cards that are not curses. If you trash exactly 1, each play... This is so confusing because you're playing the attack now, but you're basically attacking them based on what they do next turn. Each other player discards down to 3. If you trash exactly 2, each other player gains a curse. I don't like that at all. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to go into big reasons on all this stuff because this video is going to be super long anyway. Recycle, action duration costs 5. Trash a card from your hand. Gain a card costing up to 2 more than the trashed card. Setting it aside face down. Why? Like, they know what you gain. Why is it face down? Anyway, at the start of your next turn, return the gained card to your hand and trash a card from your hand, gaining a card costing up to 1 more than that trashed card. So it's remodel now. Later you get the card in hand, that's reasonably interesting, and then you can upgrade next turn. That's a fine card. It's actually exactly upgrade next turn, except you have even a slightly bigger hand. That's a fine card. I don't know that it's super exciting, but it's absolutely fine and reasonably interesting anyway. Martello costs 3. It's an action duration now at the start of your next turn. Plus an action, plus a buy, so it's like pawn for action and buy now, mark a square later. While it's in play, when any player gains a card, that's going to happen very often, you may choose for him to put that card on top of his deck. If you do, he may first discard the top card of his deck. So you're rarely going to make someone else top deck something unless you play like a curse or something. A cursor, I guess. Which just seems sort of narrow. I guess it synergizes well with chunking attacks, and otherwise most of the time it's just going to be action buy and then action buy next turn, and you can top deck everything, which is, I guess, fine, but probably a bit weak. Unless there's a junker, in which case it's probably okay. I mean, that card's fine. A bit weak is better than a bit strong. Okay, Kraken. Or is it Kraken? I always pronounce it Kraken, like Liam Neeson in that Greek mythology, which was probably not accurate, but I didn't really see it as something. What was it? Revenge or Clash of the Titans that has that ad that it's release the Kraken. Like, I think he played Zeus. I don't know. I didn't see the movie. Anyway, but I've heard Kraken a lot, but I just think that sounds weird. Anyway, Kraken. Boom. There's also a line in Juno where they say something about a Kraken. No, she might say Kraken. Anyway, 2 money. It's an action reaction. 2 money, put a card from your hand on top of your deck. That's so weak. It's like a worse Mandarin and costs more. Okay, what's this below the line? It better be good. When you put this on top of your deck, you may reveal it. Okay, so if you have multiples of these, put it on top of your deck. But do you put it, like, what constitutes putting it on top of your deck? Because putting it is not a defined game term. And so it could be like, oh, I shuffled and ended up putting it on top of my deck. Or which, I mean, mostly won't come up, but what if your deck is only 4 stashes in this? Then you know you put it on top of your... Yeah, anyway. Okay, let's get past that. When you put it on top of your deck, you may reveal it. If you do, choose a card in the supply. Each other player gains a copy of the chosen card, putting it on the bottom, so you get to curse them. That's way too weak for such a situational cursor. Way, way too weak. This thing could cost like 4. I think. And is not well defined. And wouldn't be interesting at 4 anyway, I don't think. Like, you're always going to choose curse until they're gone. And you're never going to be able to get enough of these. And maybe it would have to cost 5, but then it wouldn't be very exciting. It's not very exciting anyway. Alright, flagship. Ooh, I like the name flagship. Oh, action duration costs 5. Set aside from a card from your hand face down at the beginning of your next turn. Reveal the set aside card, then reveal cards from your deck until you reveal a copy of it. It should be the set aside card. It's a little bit ambiguous. I assume it's the set aside card. Discard the other revealed cards and either trash both copies or put them into your hand. Okay, so it's a way that you can trash a couple of coppers or estates or curses, which is pretty weak, or spring a card over for the next turn and get a couple of them, which is sort of interesting, but I don't know that it's all that strong. You could maybe use it at 4. Sort of an interesting idea, though. Because the interesting thing is, the cards that you really want to pair... Oh, Treasure Map. Yeah, that's the one that this would work really well for. But, yeah, I mean, you're probably usually putting them both in hand, I would think. Like, you could just use this as a way to get a couple extra coppers next turn and 1 fewer this turn. And as a way of smoothing out and various things like that, I think it's probably okay. Maybe do some things with Tunnel. Yeah, this is an interesting card. I bet it could cost 4, but it's pretty interesting. Okay, Vessel. Now and at the start of your next turn, plus a buy, plus a coin. While it's in play, when another player gains a card costing 4 or more, gain a card costing less than it. So this is buy in money now, which is pretty weak, but market next turn, that's decent, and then you get to gain cheaper cards. That's fine. But like so many of the other things, it's fine but not interesting. Okay, Mermaid. Plus an action, discard the top card of your deck, put the bottom card of your deck into your hand. You may gain up to 2 cards. You may put up to 2 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck. So you draw from the bottom and discard the top card of your deck. I don't know why you do that. I don't know why you discard. It's supposed to be like a reverse Pearl Diver, I'm sure. But I don't get the discard the top of your deck. Really, it doesn't make any sense mechanically. You may put up to 2 cards from your hand on bottom of your deck, which you really wouldn't want to do unless you just have a great hand. So mostly this is just some fancy way of storing a card for much later, but not in a very good way, and the discarding the top of your deck basically doesn't do anything, and it's a cantrip. I mean, and that's fine, but I would not vote for Pearl Diver in a contest like this, and that's probably, I bet I like Pearl Diver even a little better than this. Okay, Beacon B. Action duration costs 2 plus 2 cards at the start of your next turn, plus a card, and put a card from your hand on top of your deck. So while it's in play, when you gain a card, trash that or put it on top of your deck. Okay. So it's Moat now that lets you, that is constantly a Watchtower reaction. And Moat next turn, but then you have to put something back. So it's more of a filter next turn. This card is just so much better than Moat that I think it should cost 3. And then 2 similar to Watchtower, so I don't really like it. But like, it doesn't defend against discard attacks, I guess, like Moat does, but or deck inspection attacks quite, but it's almost just like a much better Moat, I think. It stays out a little longer. I don't know. I don't like it. Dispatch. Action duration costs 4. Trash a card from your hand. Gain an action card costing up to 2 more than it, setting it aside face down. At the start of your next turn, play that action. So it's a remodel that has to get you an action. So it's not strictly better. And then you get to play the action next turn. This actually lets it trash coppers much better, probably. Playing the action next turn is going to be reasonably strong. Yeah, I mean, it's fine, but unexciting. Observatory. Plus an action, trash a card from your hand, look at 1 card from your deck per coin and its cost. Okay. You may put 1 of them into your hand. That's worded a little weird, but I get what it's saying, so it works. You may put 1 of them into your hand and discard any number of the others. Put the rest back in any order. So, actually just being able to trash a card from your hand is non-terminally is not that bad. I mean, that compares with Forager reasonably well. Trashes estates better than Forager, especially early on. Oh, you may put 1 of them into your hand? So it trashes estates like, basically like a junk dealer does. The card's a bit too strong, but, and it's sort of Seaside-y. It needs to cost more, but if you make it cost probably 4, then I think it's fine. Yeah, I think I'd make it cost 4, and I'd like it quite a bit. Treasure Fleet. So this is a plus because it's miscosted. Big deal. Treasure Fleet. Action duration costs 4. 2 money now and at the start of your next turn plus a buy. So it's Woodcutter now, Market Square later. While it's in play, when you buy a card, gaining a treasure card costing less than it, setting it aside and putting it in your hand later on. So it might make you gain a copper, but it will often, you'll most often be buying something costing 4 or more. I guess you could end up getting lots of coppers in hand, which could be good if the game's about to end, especially because you're going to get plus buys. This card seems very strong, in fact. I quite like the idea because it floods you out, so but it gives you the buy that you're going to need for the extra money. So this buying this, gaining silver, has got to be pretty good. But not broken or anything. Probably actually not all that strong. I quite like this idea. It might need to cost 5, but testing will tell that. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. Alright, Commune. Action duration. Now and at the start of every turn this card is in play. So, permanent duration cards are something that permanent cards are something I'm a big fan of, but I guess I should have said earlier, they don't feel Seaside to me, right? If it's going to stay out multiple turns. Now, if there's some wonky way, because it modifies another duration card, that it stays out more than 2 turns, that seems okay in Seaside-y to me. Like something that was a Throne Room now and later, or something, Throne now and at the start of your next turn, choose an action card in your hand, play it twice, or something like that. Costs 6, something like that, Because it could duration into modifying another duration. That's by that make it stay out longer. But that'll be fine, right? But just like something that's gonna stay in play longer, I don't like. Anyway, like in often. Okay. Anyway, now at the start of your every turn this is in play, trash a card from your hand, draw until you have 5 cards in hand. No, 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 no. Do not discard this from play during your cleanup phase. I guess that works, but it's ugly and doesn't work. It basically makes it not a duration, right? It doesn't need to be a duration if... Yeah, I don't know. It sort of circumvents it, but I guess it can be, whatever. But while it's in play, it's also in the supply. That means other players can buy and gain it. And it's very hard for that pile to run out. And is it in the commune pile? No, it's not. So the pile, I guess, still can run out. But another player could buy or gain it, which is really weird if they're out. And yeah, that's quite weird. But you have to trash a card, and then you get a draw back. Is probably roughly like a and you can always buy it back to get it out of play if your deck is that good. But it's probably roughly like a upgrade kind of effect where you draw in the wrong order after this turn, which is pretty darn strong for a 2, especially since it doesn't have to be in your deck at all. Seems very strong, and I don't like the weird ruling on it, so I'm going to pass on that. Customs Officer is an action duration that's a cantrip. It only costs 1, which I don't like. While it's in play, when you gain a card, you may return to the supply, gaining a card. Gain a card with cost exactly equal to the total cost of the returned cards. It's not a duration. There's nothing that makes it stay out. To the total cost of the returned cards? You're only ever returning 1 card, because you only ever gain cards 1 at a time. So the total cost is just the exact same cost. So all this would do would be defend you from cursors and looters that you could turn them into coppers or other ruins or something. Yeah. Oh, it and this to the supply. Oh, and this. So you get to upgrade it. So this is basically another version of that. This is like a cantrip. Okay, first of all, it's not a duration at all. There's absolutely nothing which makes it a duration. But it's a cantrip that then whenever you gain something... Yeah, so this is supposed to be like that reaction. There's nothing that makes it stay out. So, I mean, it would work if there was something that made it stay out next turn, but there isn't. And then it's like a copper because you return this. So it's like a one-shot peddler. I believe that should cost more than 1. It should probably cost 3 at least. Possibly 4. Although 4 is sort of weak, but 3, opening double this seems quite strong. Possibly, at least potentially. But it doesn't duration work like whoever thought it was going to. It doesn't stay out at all. Okay, supply ship. Action duration costs 5, gain an action or treasure costing up to 4, and set it aside. At the start of your next turn, play it. Okay, so this is another one of these kinds of effects. That's a... It's a workshop that... I don't see why it needs to be limited to action or treasure. Because if it's a victory card, like I gain into Gardens. At the start of my next turn, I play it. I can't, so you just don't. I mean, I guess, what happens to it then, but I'd rather it be able to gain victory cards because, well, it seems quite weak, right? I mean, you could gain a card and then play it next turn, but it's a terminal now. This thing could probably cost 4. And it's just not that exciting to me. Drift Bottle costs 4, not a duration. Plus 2 cards, choose 1, trash the card on the Drift Bottle mat, or gain the card on the mat, should say Drift Bottle mat again, and discard a card per coin it costs. Put a card costing between 3 and 6 on the supply onto the mat. So you get a gain. You end up with, you have 6 cards in hand after you play this. Or if you're in an engine, you have a lot of cards in hand after you play this. Then you get to either just trash, so it's like slow pile trashing, or, well, it's like slow trial pile trashing, but you can maybe gain it at very high cost. Slow trial pile trashing on a moat is not exciting enough to me. Royal Armada, action duration 5, cantrip. You choose an action card in your hand and set it aside. At the start of your next turn, play it twice. So it's like a next turn throne room, which Donald talked about, but not quite like this. And, yeah, I mean, that could actually probably cost 4, no problem. It doesn't seem that great to me. It doesn't seem very exciting to me. I don't particularly like it, but I'm sure it's fine. Raider. Oh, these are all in... No, they're not in alphabetical order. Okay, Raider. Action attack duration, costs 5, plus 2 money. Each other player discards down to 3 cards in hand. Start of your next turn, plus 1, and each other player discards down to 4. So it's Militia now, Peddler plus Urchin later. It's fine, but unexciting. Seafarer's Charm and a double, what I presume is a double 1. When you discard it from play, you may put it on top of your deck. It's a treasure reaction, it costs 0 and it's worth 1. So it's almost exactly like Copper. When you discard it from play, you may put it on top of your deck. Whenever another player plays an attack card, you may discard it from your hands to be unaffected. Okay, Sunken Treasure costs 3, it's worth 1. When you shuffle, put it on bottom of your deck. That's terrible. Why would you ever get that? Seafarer's Charm and Sunken, they're not kingdom cards. They replace 2 coppers. Okay. What doesn't need a special back? It doesn't need a special back. You always have to put it at the bottom. But I don't know why it costs 3. So Seafarer's Charm is interesting. Sunken Treasure is also interesting. Although I guess, I mean, it's just a little bit better than Copper and has better benefit with trash for benefit, but isn't as good on turn 3 and 4 because it makes it more likely your states come up. I mean, I don't know. They're fine. I don't feel a need for them, but they're fine. I also don't know that they're super Seaside-y. Right? Shelters fit more with Dark Ages to me because they're about trashing or about doing crazy combo things, and yeah, that's sort of what Dark Ages is about. Colonies and Platina definitely are spendy like Prosperity. This card just doesn't seem all that Seaside-y to me. I guess it's next turn. Yeah, they're pretty Seaside-y. Yeah, those are fine. They're not kingdom cards though, so that's sort of weird, but they're fine. Shipyard B. Action duration costs 5. Moat. Set aside a card from the supply costing up to 6. While it is set aside, copies of it cost 1 less, but not less than 0. At the start of your next turn, or when the game ends, you get to gain it. Okay. Wow. So, first of all, this card is okay. Yeah, this card is absolutely broken, right? In games with a large number of players. The third one of these in play gains you province and makes province cheaper. I mean, that's not true, right? Because you can't start off with province. Yeah, so it would combo with like highway. You get a couple highways or bridges in play. Okay, that's not that big a deal. Okay, never mind on that. But you do get to gain very expensive cards. And then they're cheaper for you to buy and for your opponent to buy, but it's cheaper more for you. Gaining up to a 6 is very powerful, though. And with it being a moat here, I think this card might be real strong. It's also just not a super exciting effect to me. I mean, it's a strong effect, but it's not interesting, sort of. I mean, it's a fine card, but anyway, Docks A. Action duration costs 4 now at the beginning of your next turn, plus a card per card you have in play. So, the problem is this is very, very good in engines, and then next turn it's weak, because it's a couple of them are just going to draw you a couple cards each. Which, if you're building an engine, you can probably do. It's very slow to get going, but I don't know. Fishmonger. I mean, this has potential, but I need to think about it more. Fishmonger is Market Square now and later. Boring. Scalawag. Action attack duration. Each player may trash a copper from his hand. If you trashed a copper, each other player gains a curse. Wow, that's really strong. At the start of your next turn, plus a card for each scallywag that any player has in play, so you get to draw 1. I guess you get to play it less often, somewhat, than normal cursing attack. At the start of your next turn, plus 1 card for each scallywag that any player has in play. If there is more than 1 in play, trash this. So, but you have to have, while this is in play, when another player plays an attack card, you may discard it. I assume that means this. If you do gain a silver, that really exacerbates like first turn advantage, doesn't it? You're just always discarding it and top decking a silver. That's a lot going on, and the card just seems very strong. Like, you can counter it, but pretty much only with itself, which just makes the card way too strong for my liking. Convoy, action duration, costs 5, plus an action. Each other player may choose 1. He draws a card, or he trashes a card from his hand. Now and at the... So, that's quite a drawback. But now and at the start of your next turn, plus 2 cards and a money. So it's a Lab Peddler. Which is pretty good, but not super, super powerful. And it labs them, or trashes for them. That's not even that good for you. I guess it labs you twice. Lab Peddlers you twice. And it only does the lab or trash for them once. Yeah, this is probably a fine card. This one's plenty interesting. Probably one of the best that I've seen, but not super great. Probably reasonably strong card. Anyway, Dock. It's an action, it costs 4, it's not a duration, 2 actions and a buy. And just a very weak village. While this is in play, when you gain an action card during your buy phase, okay, you may put this and the gained card on top of your deck in either order. I'm not sure why it's gained during your buy phase as opposed to just buy. But, so it lets you... I actually quite like that, because the top decking, the card would be weak, except you can put it back with your terminal draw card. So like this, and then you buy a smithy, and then you play this in smithy, and you end up with 6 cards in hand, like you'd played a lab, but you also have a buy. That's pretty nice. Yeah, that's a quite nice effect. I would just change it to when you buy an action card, but it's also on top of your deck. I would say not in either order. I'd say in any order. Even though either order is fine, it just sounds better in this case for any order. And I don't know that I would restrict it to actions. You putting this in a treasure back doesn't seem broken to me. Putting this in a victory card back also doesn't seem broken to me. I mean, that seems fine. I really like this one, though. Okay, Harbor. It's probably not that strong, but I really like the idea. Harbor. Costs 4 plus money, and you can trash it. It's an action duration. Do not discard this from play during your cleanup phase. I don't like this way of keeping things in. It seems very clunky. While it's in play at the start of your turn, plus this also makes it stay out forever. At the start of your turn, plus a card. And then whenever another player buys a victory card, discard this from play and gain a Harbor. Wow, this is super strong if they're not buying victory cards, right? Because it's a terminal copper now that you can trash. That's very bad. But it labs you every turn, which is really good. Also, I don't like to stay and play forever things. Yeah, I'm quite down on this, because it's too good. And does weird things of incentivizing people to buy victory cards, which is in and of itself good, but I don't really like the way this does it here. Okay, Shipyard C, action duration. Costs 5 plus 2 buys. Now at the start of your next turn, look through your discard, reveal up to 3 coppers, and put them in your hand. Hello, Counting House. And you get extra coppers from it. Okay. While it's in play, when you would gain a card, you may gain a copper instead. So it defends you from cursing attacks. It gets you just lots and lots and lots of coppers. Unfortunately, you need some way of being able to play multiples still to really make it work, or particularly with Counting House. So it's like Counting House. I don't think we need another effect like that. This has some interesting, like the buys makes it a little more interesting, but and if Counting House didn't exist, I think maybe I'd like this more, but I just don't right now. Alright. Expedition, action duration costs 4. Gain an action, putting it on top of your deck. Put a copy of it on the Expedition mat. At the start of your next turn. Okay. I should just not read all of these so much. Return the copied card to the supply. While it's in play, at the start of each other player's turn, he may play a card from the mat. So okay, this part, first of all, is just like Armory. Then at the start of your next turn, you get a village, which can go well with your Armory. But okay. From the play or from the trash. This doesn't quite work with the lose track rule, but you can probably fix that. Just have it immediately be returned to the mat. He may play a card from the mat. If he does, return it to the mat. Done. Everybody else gets to play the card, which really makes this guy weak. Yeah, it makes this guy really weak, because all it does for you over Armory is gives you a village the next turn, and misses the shuffle more often. But it lets everybody else play that card that you wanted. And it has to be an action card. This thing could cost 2, I think it'd still be weak. Oh, wait, it's any action card. Oh, my bad. Still, they get to play it. You gain it. I don't know. Maybe that's okay. With 6 costs you want to mass, it might be really, really good. Because they all get to get the benefit of it before you do. But you get to have it with the village, and you get to gain it permanently. Yeah, this is an interesting card. Needs to be rewarded a little bit, but this one's definitely one to watch. It's interesting. Okay, Voyage. Action duration costs 5. Reveal cards from your deck until you reveal 3. Costing from 3 to 6. Wow, that could take forever. Put those cards on top of your deck in any order and discard the rest at the start of your next turn plus 2 cards. So, again, the next turn effect doesn't have any synergy because you're going to draw those cards anyway and you're clean up. Probably. When you discard this from play, instead trash this and gain a Voyage. So you just eat through the pile, which I don't understand the point of. I guess it limits how often you can do this. But it's also basically next turn you get a mega turn, because 3 cards from 3 to 6 is a lot. In fact, just these, I mean, that's very strong, but maybe not broken. I don't know that I like it. It just like stacks your deck for you. That doesn't seem the most fun or exciting. Okay, Old Seafarer. Action duration 6 before the cleanup phase. But should probably be at the end of your buy phase. Set aside cards in your play area. At the start of your next turn, discard your hand. Put the set aside cards into your hand. There should be a D there. And each other player draws a card. So you just get all the cards from your hand that you played this turn into your hand next turn. And while it's in play, you can't play one. So in an engine, you get to just double everything up. And it's terrible in anything but an engine. Or, I mean, not necessarily. Like, if I have a bunch of money in play, I could play this. I could play this, and then if I get a bunch of money in play, I can buy province now and then buy province later at the cost of labbing everyone else. But you're just not going to be able to do that if you're spending 6 buys on terminals that don't do anything for you. So this is basically just an engine card, which is often not that good, and basically definitionally Terra broken, I'm pretty sure. Okay, Settlement. And I think we're getting close to the end. Yeah, we are. Sweet. Action duration costs 5. Now and at the start of every turn this is in play, already not a good sign for me. 2 buys and 2 money, and it has that thing. So base also, again, they have to buy a victory card, or otherwise next turn it's much better than Grand Market. And much easier to get. Well, not much better, but somewhat better, and then much easier to get. And then you discard it only when they buy victory cards. Yeah, it's just too strong. And I don't like the perpetual durations this way, or based on the victory card thing. I don't like that. Coastal Raiders, action attack duration. Each other player discards down to 3 cards in hand at the start of your next turn, plus 3 money. So now it's the militia attack. Later it's a terminal gold for 3. That's very strong. It should at least cost 4, because this and this, if they collide, that's not good. But durations have a good way of not colliding as much, especially the ones like these. And just playing these all the time, spamming, getting 2 or 3 of these, or 4, because they're probably going to get it, and then you're going to be discarding all the time, so it doesn't matter. Massing these seems like it'd probably be pretty good, although it's maybe not broken. It just seems better than militia to me. I mean, yeah, it's split up, but this every turn is better than militia every turn, and it costs 3. I guess it should probably just cost 4, and then it would probably be okay. Although it also gets your hands lopsided for you, which is what you want generally, in money decks particularly. Yeah, it's one of the more interesting cards, but I don't think one that I'm planning on voting for, at least at this moment. Okay, just past the hour mark. I'm gonna wrap this up here soon. Sea Harvest. Well, that's got to be some kind of reference to harvest. Types, action duration, costs 5. Plus an action. Gain an action card costing less than 1 per card in your hand. So gain a cheap action unless you're playing an engine, in which case gain up to an expensive action. At the start of your next turn, gain a treasure costing less than 1 per card in your hand, which will probably be a silver. But if you have some other durations, might be up to a platinum, like if you have a tactician. Yeah, so this is like a double. This is largely like a double workshop, but a little bit cheaper, and it's non-terminal. Yeah, I quite like that effect. Double workshops were something I was trying to get to work. I mean, plain straight double workshop would probably be okay at 4. But just a little boring. Maybe it'd be really good at 4. Anyway, Shipyard. Action duration costs 5. This is Sea Harvest is probably better than straight double workshop. Shipyard D. Action duration costs 5 plus 2 cards. Put a card from your hand on top of your deck. At the start of your next turn, gain a card costing up to 4, putting it into your hand. So plus 2 cards, put a card from your hand on top of your deck is not that strong, but not the worst thing ever. However, the next turn effect is very, very powerful. So Throne Room and Treasure Map are big combos. And just being able to gain a silver in hand is like a Grand Market or Activated Conspirator, which is pretty nice. It does cost 5 though, so I think it at least has some promise. Overall, I think this is probably the best batch of submissions yet. Anyway, please comment on it in the thread, and that's what I think.